Tuning in to the online broadcast network, AFTERBUZZ TV. Over 20 million weekly downloads in over 150 countries, and your #1 source for after-show entertainment. AFTERBUZZ TV, the destination for TV superfans, producing after-shows for over 300 of your favorite TV shows, interviewing celebrities and showrunners, and bringing you behind-the-scenes exclusives. All thanks to E! Entertainment's Maria Menounos, producer Kevin Undergaro, and internet leader Akamai. Now, let the buzz begin!
Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to the AFTERBUZZ TV after show for Madam Secretary, The Kill List, plural. Season 1, episode 21. We have made it so far. The finale is next week.
Crazy.
So crazy. Before we get into it, you guys can find us at AfterBuzzTV.com and of course YouTube.com/AfterBuzzTV, and also on iTunes. Be sure to go on there. If you like our podcast, rate and review us. 5 stars. Leave us your comments. Let us know what you think about the show. Other than that, you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Sterling Cates, and joining me is Miss April Whisenhant.
What the perfect pronunciation. Y'all can find me on Twitter and Instagram at April Whisenhant.
How do people usually say it? It's like
I get crazy stuff.
Oh, all right, we'll talk about that later.
Whisenhart, all kind of crazy stuff.
Yeah. That's an interesting one.
That's a stretch.
That's pretty funny. All right, well, let's get into a little Madam Secretary. Yeah. We only have 1 week left.
I can't believe it, and I feel like we're at like the pinnacle of, you know, we thought like the stuff with Marsh was the crazy stuff, and tonight I felt myself like kind of on the edge of my seat, really. I don't know, into it.
Well, we know it's been renewed for a 2nd season, so it's very exciting. So we definitely have that to look forward to. But it's been 21 episodes. It's felt like we've been here for a long time talking about the show, falling in love with it. It keeps getting better and better. You know, because it's a pilot, so it could really go either way. And when we sign up for these after shows, it's kind of like, you know, with the pilot, we'll see. But it turned out to be a really great show. I'm hooked on it. And I just love the whole cast, and I love where it's gone. And we've gotten so many answers that we thought we'd never get.
I'm still like I need to know so much more.
Yeah, well,
especially
that's
after tonight.
That's what the 2nd season's for. So we have that to look forward to, and obviously next week for the huge finale, which we will be doing on Monday night instead of Sunday. Yes. So stay tuned for that. We will still be here just a little bit later than usual. All right, so let's go on and get into this episode. Yeah. So we had last week off. Right? Yeah. When we have these breaks and they give us these breaks, I always get very sidetracked. You know, I just get distracted. I don't know what happens last. But we have all of this going on with Juliet. Yeah. And finally, we see, starting off at the top of this episode, that Elizabeth is seeing a therapist, the one that Russell recommended her to, because she's gone through a traumatic event as well. Right,
and she seems to really be enjoying her. Or at least opening up to her, which is really tough for her a lot of times. And she's telling her stuff, you know, at the end of the episode, stuff that she hasn't even said to Henry. So I think this is definitely a good thing for her, and it seems like it's helping her because she hasn't had any more PTSD attacks, as far as we've seen anyway.
Yeah, I agree. And, you know, we haven't seen her taking her medication, and she wasn't doing a very good job of that either. So it is good to see her getting into some therapy sessions, talking about it. But, you know, she is in a very tricky position because she can't really share everything. Right. Just because most of the stuff she deals with is very highly classified. But she can use
call her Jane.
Yeah, so she calls Juliet Jane. But one of her biggest concerns that she talks about is that she is supposed to, her job, she's supposed to be able to understand people or read people or know exactly what their motives are. And that just comes along with the territory. And the fact that she wasn't able to do that with Juliet, it troubles her. And that seems to be not, you know, the attack necessarily. We don't see her really talking about that in the therapy sessions, but this whole Juliet situation is really weighing heavily on her.
Because that's a best friend, someone, she even refers to her as family. But she has to think about, and I don't think she's really processing this, you know, she says throughout the episode about like, oh, I know Juliet and she's not dumb enough to do this, and like she's so smart and whatever. Yeah. So she has to remember, yes, she didn't see these signs whatsoever, but just as much as Madam Secretary is trained, you know, with these CIA tactics, so is Juliet. That's how they know each other.
Yeah.
So it's not her fault. You know, you literally can't catch them all, especially if, you know, a person who, just because, you know, we know each other very well, but that doesn't mean we might not have a different ideal about something, and maybe we just haven't shared it. So
yeah, it's very true. And, you know, if Juliet knows that Elizabeth will read her a certain way, then she'll act a different way, or she'll get in tighter, keep your enemies closer, sort of thing. So, I mean, and it seems like next week in the preview that we'll see more of that because of everything that happens, which we'll get to a little later.
Right.
But so on the same topic of Juliet, so her husband, Aiden, still has no idea what's going on. The FBI is contacting him weekly, it seems, seeing if he knows anything about where Juliet is or if you know, she's made any contact with them. But we see in the very beginning of the episode that she is tapped in to the webcam in the Humphrey family home through the webcam. So she's watching the family at dinner. She has 2 daughters. They still set her a place at the table.
She hugs her.
Yeah. And so, I mean, it is very sad because she had to leave the family behind.
Yeah.
And
I just always, like, of course, like, love for your country, absolutely. And that comes with the job, with it being her job. But I'm like, that's your family.
Well, you know, and we can't even say anything as to what her motives are because it seems like next week when we get her in that interrogation room is when we'll learn.
Well, I think she's thinking of it. I think the whole, like, ideal behind the coup is, you know, kind of for the greater good, because they think that overthrowing this government was going to be for the greater good.
Yeah.
And even though she has to, you know, basically give up her entire family, I mean, she's willing to do it to save this many lives, or that's what she thinks is going to save it. But, you know, it's so funny that whenever I saw that the webcam was being accessed at first, I was like, oh, is he somehow, I thought like her husband was doing it to like let her, just to help her see him. But obviously we know that he wasn't. And it's just so sad to think that, like, she can't tell them anything. I mean, imagine just, you know, being a kid. I think it was Lily's 6th birthday party in tonight's episode. And so imagine, you know, that's old enough to, like, know what's going on.
Understand that your mom's not around, and and old enough to realize that she's gone and to miss her.
Right.
And so I think that's, you know, really can be really hard on the kids, obviously. And especially on her husband, because he doesn't even know what to tell the kids.
Exactly.
And he goes to Henry for answers. Henry's playing basketball because he's perfect, obviously.
And he's good at everything.
He's good at everything. But you can see that Aiden and Henry are friends, and they kind of have that connection just because their wives had the same job, and they, you know, kind of bond on that. But Aiden goes to him and kind of opens up, and he's not supposed to go to anyone and say that the FBI, you know, has been on his case about where Juliet is.
Right.
But while he's asking Henry for answers or seeing if he can maybe ask Elizabeth something, he reveals that on the night of their anniversary dinner, he had suspicions that Juliet was cheating on him. And
that's probably what I would think.
Well, I mean, she was doing, you know, the kind of sketchy behavior. And so he left the kids at home while they were asleep and followed her when she left after their anniversary dinner. And she went to a payphone and called someone, which is, you know, she's in the CIA. So the payphone isn't a secure line. They have a secure line at the house. So he's like, why are you going to an unsecure line?
Right.
And so that was very suspicious. But he never said anything about it because he didn't want to get anyone in trouble or make it seem a certain way that maybe
as long as he knew she wasn't cheating, he was okay.
Yeah. And but he knew something was up, but he was nervous that it might be something bigger than what he initially thought. And of course, Henry takes this information to Elizabeth, but this is after MSEC has been told that the NSA found Juliet through she was on the server long enough for them to ping her location.
Yeah, it's like a server crashed or something like that, and that's how they found her.
And it was from when she was hacking the webcam in her home. It was like a long enough period of time for them to dial in on where that was coming from. And so MSEC's brought into the Situation Room, and she learns from the president and Russell that the Attorney General has signed off on taking Juliet out. Now that they have her location in Algeria, and it apparently is a very secluded area just that's like away from
building
civilians.
On a mountain.
Right, yeah. And so they're like, this is our chance. She's the last member that we know of this coup.
Right.
We could take her out, and you know, MSEC's says she agrees to it, and she says she wants, and the president's like, you can sit this one out,
right?
Because if you participate, you're helping us to, essentially execute your friend. Mm-hmm. And she says, she does it, and this is a conversation between her and Russell that we saw a lot, not only this whole season, but this episode especially, is, just being a good soldier for the president and seeing through his objectives. And so
she's just fully participating.
Yeah, and even though she doesn't 100% believe in what is happening, to me, when I heard that, I was like, okay, she's got like something up her sleeve planned to do with this discussion she's going to have with the leaders of Algeria.
See, I didn't think that.
I didn't see I didn't know what it was. But you know how she always has like something that we don't know right at the front. But she ended up not having.
Yeah, that wasn't even the plan though. Like she was fully going for the drone attack, because if they did it that way, if they did it another way, then there was the chance of her finding out, because she was in such a remote location.
Yeah.
So she was for the drone attack, and obviously it is I don't know how you reconcile that with yourself as a person, being a part of that. But then you have to think about Juliet was also a huge part of killing some of their other best friends, like Marsh, or people they were close to, and George.
Yeah.
So, I mean, how does it outweigh one another? I mean, I don't know.
And that's something that Elizabeth really struggles with, and that's something she speaks to the therapist about, is she doesn't even understand how Juliet could even do something like that to hurt one of their friends. And she can't wrap her head around that. So she goes to the ambassador of Algeria, who, and she explains the plan. They want to take out Juliet in this remote location. And he obviously has concerns about, will it affect any of our civilians? Will they be killed? And he agrees to doing a ground operation, but not a drone strike.
Which we of course don't want to do, because that she could know it's coming before it happens
and escape. And So, but Russell gets very upset because this isn't what they agreed to do with the president. The president thinks she's being biased,
They just think she didn't try hard enough.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's kind of true. And she semi-admits it herself, because when does she not get what she wants? And Russell pointed out, he's like, it's the Algerians. Like, open up your wallet. Like, she didn't offer any other
She didn't have any counter.
What else can I give you in order to do this? So and I think that's her conscience playing with it, because it's like, okay, I am trying hard, but maybe I'm not going to go like the extra mile, which she, you can clearly see that it bothers her.
And we see her every episode going the extra mile and negotiating and getting her way, one way or another. It all has
gone her
way. And she didn't do that in this particular conversation. So, and with a couple other things this episode that we'll talk about in a second. So that is, let's stop there with the Algeria Juliet thing and back up a second. And so meanwhile, the president of Iran is coming, President Shiraz, and he's coming to sign this nuclear
treaty that they've been working on
this whole
the entire season.
The entire season. It's, this huge thing Elizabeth has fought so hard for.
That's the reason why the coup, not only because it was going to kill people, but that's why the coup was so bad, because it was going to ruin.
It's not worth the risk of, having a nuclear attack on our soil. And this is kind of saying, no nuclear bombs are going to be dropped. And it's a huge deal. And she even said in this episode, it's probably going to be the first line of her obituary.
Yeah.
That's how big of a deal it is. It'll be Madam Secretary had this deal signed. And so the president is coming to do that, to sign. But meanwhile, there is... on the day of the treaty signing, there is an execution planned of a gay man. His name is Amadi. Yes, Amadi. And because that culture just doesn't accept being gay, and so they have this execution of him to be stoned on the same day of the treaty.
And it's just coincidental that it's happening, but it's actually really not.
It's not.
Because the Iranians, they've already been put through so much, you could say, with us, and so basically it's the way of President Shiraz saying, like, oh, I was gone while this happened.
So he can't be held responsible, but really he is.
So it's their way of saying, like, we're dealing with the West, but we're not going soft. I think they said that specifically in the episode.
Yeah.
You know, to show, like, oh, well, you know, we'll do this with them to not have nuclear war, but, like, you don't think that we're letting their Western ways, if you would, affect how we are.
Yeah, and that just opens up the conversation, especially for MSEC and her team, is do we want to work with people who have completely different ideologies than we do?
And that's why we see the Human Rights Commission come in, because they are going to protest on the day of White House, on the day of the deal that they're signing the deal. Obviously, you know, they want to sign that. Jay's kind of put in charge of, you know, making them not do the protest, but clearly we see that doesn't work. Yeah. But it even made me start to think, you know, because obviously we can't, just because we think a certain way, you can never force anyone else to think a certain way.
Right, exactly.
But if you disagree about so many things so wholeheartedly, then how can you really trust them about this little deal that we're signing? Yeah,
and I think that point is a great segue into the conversation that we see between Jay and Elizabeth, because, you know, Jay this whole episode was working on a way to figure out that we can not allow stop the stoning, but also get the nuclear treaty signed.
Right.
And to figure out a way to do that, because the Human Rights Committee is planning this huge protest. And, you know, Jay says he finds a couple of ways, but at the end of the day, Madam Secretary says, I cannot risk not getting this nuclear treaty signed, because this life, although she would love to, you know, save,
of course,
Almaty's life, obviously she would do anything, but she can't risk a bomb being dropped in New York or DC or whatever,
an atomic
bomb that, you know, could affect and kill millions of lives, as opposed to one life. So it's kind of like, it's that struggle, and she's in her therapy session says it's never going to be easy, and she has to make these decisions where she doesn't, and she can't worry about the outcome. She just has to make the decision. And, you know, Jay is very passionate about it, and he says, you know, I don't think we should do this nuclear deal unless they save and stop the execution, because you can't have either or. To Jay, that's what his argument was.
Well, and he says it because of the trust thing. Like, how can we deal with these people who are willing to do these things to their own citizens? Exactly. But we'll sign this. Like, how can we trust them for this? But even whenever he said that about the person, so the only reason they want to stop this protest that the Human Rights Committee is going to do is because basically it puts like a shadow a little bit on the signing of the deal. So it's not just going to be like, this is the day this major history was made. It's also going to be like, but they were protesting the people that we were making it with. I'm thinking, like, in my head, I'm like, there's always going to be a protest about something. Like, if it wasn't this, then there's something else, which, like, is great, but, or, you know, great to express your ideals, of course. But I also, whenever Jay said the thing, like, we're not gonna do everything we can to save this man's life, I think, of course, you do everything to save any individual's life, even if, you know, there is a larger thing in mind. But when Madam Secretary made the best point, she's like, because he's like, they're going to stone them, and he went into great detail of how this was going to happen. And of course, you know, we're sitting there like, but she made a great point. Like, they do this, you know, if a woman commits adultery, they do the same thing, and if this happens, then they do that.
Right.
And there's, as sad as it is, there's literally not a way to save every single person's life, because we can't force the hand of anyone. We can do whatever we can, but you can't force the hand of a country that you are not a citizen of.
I agree. Yeah, that's exactly it. And I think it's a good point to recognize that Jay said, you know, how can we trust these people? Because I think that's going to be a lot about what we're talking about next week in the finale, with what Juliet's going to talk about is, you know, even though this nuclear deal has been signed, are they going to hold up the end of their bargain? And, you know, was it worth it?
Right.
And she even says, you know, was this treaty a mistake? And, well, I think we'll talk about that a lot next week, and we'll probably talk about it in our predictions as well.
Right.
But yeah, so I think this whole conversation with Jay, like, foreshadows a little bit into, can we trust that we're making the right decisions here?
Right. Because we've seen them, you know, go off the cuff and so many other things. Basically, like, just because we said, even when it was, I forget his name right now, but the old minister that died. Oh, how am I forgetting his name? You know who I'm talking about, though, that died in the coup attack. You know, they just because like something doesn't go their way or wasn't going their way, it was like, deal over. We don't care what we said. Yeah. So we've seen that kind of happen with them before. So what's to make it not happen again?
And that was kind of the whole point of the coup anyway, was to get that leadership out of there. But so going back to Juliet, so turns out that that Juliet wasn't in that location. So she set it all up. She planned it all out.
She spilled her own blood on the ground so that they would think she had died there.
Exactly. So to kind of seem that she was dead, and she was on the webcam for longer than she knew she needed to. I mean, she's smart. She knows what she's doing.
The whole time I'm like, even if a server crashed, like, no, there's just no way.
Yeah, it was all planned out. She's in D.C. because Elizabeth put that together because she went to Juliet's daughter's birthday, and she said she saw her mom with like this golden halo thing, but then she sees the golden scarf, and she's just like, she's here. She's in the city.
Right.
So they know that. And going back to the payphone call, they tracked it down. Made a call to a burner phone that made a call to another burner phone.
Right.
And long story short,
that guy was in prison, and then they cut a deal with him to give up the owner of the burner phone that Juliet called.
With all the deals and negotiations and whatever,
you know, we kept that straight.
They narrowed it down to Brian Kurtwell, who used to be in the Army, but now he's a DC Metro cop, and
they met, like, him and Juliet met like 11 years ago or something like that.
And that's who she called that night. And so that's who she's connected to in DC.
And that's who she's up to.
He's like on location somewhere.
Right. Or DC. He was in the, so obviously he's a Metro cop, so they do all of the security. Anytime someone comes to town. And so he was in the, I forget what they called it, but like basically he was a sniper, for like a hidden sniper for like to protect President Shiraz.
Exactly. So, and then Elizabeth's like, well, nope, he's gonna kill him. Yeah. And that's what he's there for, because he's connected to Juliet, and obviously he's setting up for an assassination.
They think the coup is over because they think she's the last person to do anything, and maybe she was the last person really involved, but you know, I guess she clearly has some sort of other like surefire involvement with this guy.
Exactly. So we see them all lined up on top of the building, and then the FBI comes and get them, and they're able to quietly
and the motorcade just like goes. And then I kept, whenever that happened, like when the motorcade, you just see it turn, I'm like, oh, JFK.
That's all
I can think about.
So Brian is caught, and Juliet is in a hotel room, and she sees it on the news that the motorcade is successfully getting to the spot, and she realizes then that it's kind of all over. It's all over, and she walks to her home where her husband and her kids are, and the FBI is already on it. They're there, and she is taken in front of the kids, which is a very sad moment, because to me I was like, don't let your kids see that, because you know that's about to happen.
Well, all I could think was,
I guess she wanted to say
she
bye.
Knew, I feel like she knew it was over. Maybe she wanted to see them one more time, because you know they're not going to let her kids and husband visit her in wherever they're holding her.
Well, she probably thinks she's going to be killed, honestly. Yeah.
So I think that, as sad as it was, like, she wanted to just see their faces one more time. That's why she yelled out, "Lily, Miles!"
And then she said, "I love you," and you know, that's probably could be the last time she sees them. We don't know. Maybe we'll find out in season 2. But meanwhile, the treaty is being signed, and Elizabeth comes to meet the leaders of Iran, and
she is salty to them.
Sassy. Well, because she just had this, she's coming off this conversation with Jay about, you know, they aren't tolerant of a lot of things that they should be, and she doesn't want to seem like they're best friends, you know. Oh yeah, it's totally fine that you have this execution planned on the day that, you know, and you're overshadowing it with this treaty or whatever. She was very defensive, and she was like, I'm not gonna like kiss up to you by any means.
I love that they were like, this is the man, I'm forgetting his name's replacement, and she was like, yeah, I really appreciated his forward thinking.
Yeah,
I was just kind of waiting for the president to
she was like, I'm not gonna play dumb here. Like, I know what's happening, and I love that about her, because she was just very, you know,
She was diplomatic.
Yeah, and it's just part of the job, you know. And part of me didn't want them to sign it. I was like, oh, they're not going to sign it. But meanwhile, they're like their pens on the paper, and I was like, all right, well, they signed it. So they were able to save President Shiraz's life with intervention of the assassination.
Yes.
And but unfortunately the execution did take place, and Ahmadi was stoned, and that all happened. And the protest happened as well in front of the White House, and Jay joined it with his baby.
Which I thought I was very proud of him for that.
Because he was very passionate about it. And, you know, when I feel like for him as a new father, he was in that mindset of, like, what kind of world do I want my kid to grow up in?
Heck yeah.
And he's in a position to be able to fight for something that he truly believes in. And I think he did a great job of that. It's just sometimes, you know, especially when it comes with those deals and one life versus a million lives. And I know that should never be a decision that anyone has to make, but that's a decision they have to make every day in government. So, it's just very stressful. It's very stressful. It's stressful. We only have one episode left. So on a happier note, before we get to the end of what happens right at the end, Allison, the daughter,
she's 16 or about to be 16.
Is getting her driving permit. So she's doing the driving test, and they want to be a normal family. So, and Bess wants to go practice driving with her. And, you know, you see earlier, she gets called in, so she can't the first time. And so she sneaks out away from the security, gets Froyo.
I love that they did that.
Yeah, so that was good, and it was a good distraction for Elizabeth as well. And they get back from that, and Elizabeth is talking to Henry, and she tells him, you know, they called me. I got the call. They've got Juliet. They found her, and they want me to run the interrogation.
Which, you know, she says herself, she's like, it makes sense. I know her better than anyone else. Like, I know her mannerisms, how she acts, and, you know, she's gonna do it.
And I'm sure she's a little uncertain about it because, well, this is someone that she considered her best friend, but also, as we learned earlier, she does have a lot of doubt there because this is someone that she thought she could read, and now that all of this has happened, she actually didn't know her at all as well as she did. And we see a lot of flashbacks, like when she's in the elevator, she's like, oh man, those times like we were drinking wine together, or I was sharing these moments with her, and she shared a lot of information with her about, you know, her uncertainty about the whole Marsh thing before this even happened. This was at the beginning of the season when we trusted her.
The good old days.
So she's saying, you know, the treaty signed, my president's happy, which is her only goal as Secretary of State is to serve the objectives of your president. But and we see, you know, she's like, what if this treaty was a mistake? Because I think she's still, to me, it seems like she still kind of wants to trust Juliet.
Well, she wants to understand her motives for it. And I think stuff is just starting to make sense, you know, with the reasoning. Even, you know, we said, like, I understand why they want to do what they're doing, but it's just not the right way to go about it. And, you know, vice versa with, you know, all the stuff is coming up with, like, that Jay pointed out to her, like, they have this, and then she has to, like, say herself, they do this to women, they do this to these people. So it's like, really, what does making deals with a country like that say about you? And he's like, how do you, you know, when do you know when you're compromising your soul? And lady does not like to compromise her soul, that's for sure.
I know. So this episode with the whole, you know, especially, I feel like every episode at the end of it, at the conclusion, it's gone for the most part her way. She's been able to negotiate, or she's been able to, you know, other than, you know, the attack and all that stuff. But for the most part, but this time you can't, it wasn't one or the other. It was very much one or the other. It wasn't everything was resolved, especially with, you know, the execution or the treaty. And then, so, I mean, we are getting deeper into her responsibilities as Madam Secretary. And it isn't always what she wants to do, but what the president wants her to do. And when he was like, this is our legacy, but it's like really his legacy.
Yeah, she's like, thanks, but
maybe not. Still don't really agree, but so let's get into a little bit of predictions.
Oh, almost not right.
And now your AFTERBUZZ TV predictions.
So in the preview for next week, we see Juliet
You're the traitor.
Yes, saying that Madam Secretary is a traitor. We also see Madam Secretary potentially being not charged, but accused, I guess, of espionage.
Right.
And we're not really sure what that's regarding, but it could be regarding what the information she shared with Juliet before we found out that Juliet was a bad guy.
Right. Because she thought she was 100% on her side and wanted to do the same thing. Obviously, Juliet backed out, and I think that not much information was shared because you remember she was like, I don't want anything to do with this.
There were suspicions.
Right. So, but I mean, she definitely, before Juliet said she didn't want anything to do with it, had said stuff. And I think other people had as well. So, but I mean, that's one of her best friends. Of course she's going to trust her. So,
but if you think about it, like, she's sharing stuff with a therapist. I don't know if it's more than
she never says specifics, so I can't imagine.
She shares things with Henry.
They said something about like you shared it with her.
Or they did. That. Okay. I don't know. A part of me is like, well, maybe Juliet's the good guy here, and she she obviously knows that.
I think she thinks she's a good guy. I think she has like good intentions. I think what's going to happen is like Beth will probably, you know, have some turmoil in her mind. Like, was this right? Were they right? La, 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 la. But I think she's going to ultimately land on the side of the president because the coup got, you know, the prime minister of Iran killed and a lot of other people killed that didn't need to be killed.
Yeah, and even if Juliet and the coup's motives were good, that doesn't matter. That is not the answer, and also a coup is not the answer, and you know there's other ways to go about having justice or whatever.
Exactly.
So
I think she's gonna, you know, have some turmoil over it, but I think she's gonna land on the side of the prez. But it'll make her a lot more weary of the deal with Iran, which I think will go into next season.
Do you think that Elizabeth is the right person to lead the interrogation, considering her relationship with Juliet and considering her current state of mind?
I don't think
mental
so.
State.
I think you're too manipulated.
I feel like she's too close.
Yeah.
And not that, I don't think it's because she can't do it. I think she's more than capable of doing it.
Right.
But I think it might be more effective if she were on the outside and then brought in, like watching all of it.
Right. Like, oh, she's saying this because of this.
I mean, and I don't think she's unable to separate her feelings about it and getting the job done.
Right.
I think she's very professional, but I don't know, like,
But I mean, how can you ever really 100% completely separate that from a person who you used to consider family?
Yeah.
I feel like that's almost impossible. I think if anyone can, she can, but I also just think it's a situation where manipulated is the wrong word, but she just very like, well, I'm giving you points that make sense.
Yeah.
So how are you going to tell me I'm wrong? How are you going to tell me I'm the traitor?
Yeah. But and at the same time, her relationship with Juliet is a strength because she can, you know, have those, and so she knows how she thinks, talks, whatever. So it's definitely good to have. I don't know. So I guess we'll see next week where that goes. And
I can't wait.
And with the whole espionage thing, in the clip it said, and the president can't back her up, can't protect her. I'm very interested to see where the next episode will end, and then where that puts us picking up in season 2.
Right.
You know, like will the interrogation still be going on? Are we just going to see all of it next week? It's a lot to happen in one episode.
Yeah.
So we're definitely going to be, I feel like, left wanting more.
Yeah.
And that's what we'll get.
As we are every single week.
As we are every single week. Yeah. All right. Well, that about wraps it up for this week. We will be back next Monday. That is the 4th.
Yes.
Or, no, that's not. I don't know. It might be the 4th. Anyways, where can we find you on social media?
You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at April Whisenhant.
And you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Sterling Cates. And of course, all of us at AfterBuzz at AfterBuzz TV. Yeah. We will see you next week.
Next Monday. Whoop, whoop.
From executive producers Maria Menounos, Kevin Undergaro, Phil Svitek, and the entire AfterBuzz TV staff, we would like to thank you for listening to the AfterBuzz TV network. To watch or listen to other after shows and post comments or questions, be sure to visit AfterBuzzTV.com. I'm Sir Richard Wentworth, and this has been a presentation of AFTERBUZZ TV.
Buzz you later.
The views expressed herein are those of the hosts only and do not necessarily reflect the views of AFTERBUZZ TV or its owners or principals.